Impact evaluation is both an art and a science. And we'll talk about the art maybe later, but we just focus on the science of impact evaluation. It's very rare that the stars and the moons and the planets line up. And because impact evaluation is a science, it's really difficult to get the causal impact. But how do you know that what you did actually resulted to the outcome? Because there's so many intermediate pathways, there's so many other things happening that also could influence outcomes. So how is it that you know that exactly this is what we did and this is how we attribute outcomes to our effort? As I said, impact evaluation, the science these days, it's really evolving. I'd say when I was in, say, graduate school, and even there, I mean, there's a lot of high-tech impact evaluations that you can do. There's regression, discontinuity analysis. In my days, it used to be something called differences and differences. But there's something that was impact evaluation that started actually a long time ago. I don't know if you know the history of that, but that's called randomized impact evaluation, randomized control trial. And for some reason, it lines up in such a way that this is the most simplistic of impact evaluations in terms of technique, and it's also the most powerful. The statistical impact of this, if you can do this right, is by far the most powerful impact evaluation tool. And what it is it entails randomization. And briefly, just the history of that, how it got into it. Actually, randomization as a science actually was started by agriculturalists. What they did is that they had different plots of land. This is way back, starting in the 1890s and so forth, and actually before that. What they had is that they had plots of land in which they used to plant different crops with different seed intensities in different plots. And see that, okay, randomly, if you put this seed in this plot, what happens as opposed to something else. So that's where actually, if you know, randomization started off from the agricultural sciences. But it went in modern times from the agricultural sciences to the medical field. Any impact evaluation that's done really these days in the medical field relies on randomization, randomized control trials, double-blind control trials. But what it is that any medication that you hopefully take, or any medical procedure even that you do, it's basically, there's been a very rigorous randomization that's established the causal link of what's that impact. Then it went from the medical sciences to the economic sciences, and then it was labor economists actually who were the first economists to really take up randomization. It was within the context of wages. If you increase a wage rate in a certain municipality, what would be the impact of that on employment? And see that contrasted between increasing in one municipality as opposed to the other. And later on, there was natural experiments that economists took, and slowly it went into randomization. So again, at the essence, what is randomization? Randomization is a technique in which you randomly allocate a certain group to receive the treatment, and then you randomly allocate a certain group not to receive the treatment for a certain while. So that's where the treatment control comes in. As I said, you have this very much in medical sciences. The origin of this is actually in agricultural sciences, but we use it the same. It's randomized control trials. In Bangladesh, what we did is that from the beginning of the program, that's why it's the beauty of this impact evaluation, is that even before anything hit the ground, randomization was incorporated in the program implementation itself. As you know, with randomization, what happened is that not every single municipality in the Philippines received the program at the same time. If you know the National Household Targeting System for Poverty Reduction, right now there's about 5.2 million households in that targeting database. Not everyone is covered by the Pamphlet Family Program. Right now it's up to 3 point something. In the future it's going to move ahead. As you know, that's the reality. No government program can cover every single beneficiary simultaneously at the same time. It never happens. It's very unrealistic that this could ever be. So we used that aspect of it and said that as the program is being phased out into the country, let's randomly first start with introducing the program in certain municipalities and then not in others. So that's where we had these control and treatment groups. because the randomization, as I said, was done, and it was done very rigorously, we know that we have similar beneficiaries. We have certain group of households that would say are equally poor. As you know, that how you receive the NHTS poor designation or not is that there's something called a proxy means testing. And proxy means testing is that you get a predicted income score. And if your predicted income is on or below the poverty line, you are certified to be poor. If you're above the poverty line, you're not poor. It's very clear. So what we did is that we took a similar group of poor households. And some received the program in the first wave, and some didn't. Subsequently, they did after a few years as the program scaled up. But that's where the treatment and control sample comes from. And that's essentially the methodology, is that we have a very, very well-defined and randomly, exogenously defined treatment and control group. Once you have that, essentially you can run with it. You can do whatever you want. But that's the crux of it, is that getting all the difficult work is doing the randomization properly before there's even any type of programming implementation. So that's in essence what our methodology is. And then then we did a very detailed household survey. There was a household survey that was done even before the intervention, and that's called the HAF, the Household Assessment Form. And that collected basic information from the PMT scoring. But after the intervention, we collected very, very detailed data, lots of modules, whether it be in demographic characteristics, household consumption, education, healthcare behavior, all types of other factors. And I think maybe Director Doors has even got into some of the details of that. So what it is that, again, while randomization is beautiful, is that essentially you can do a very good randomized evaluation with a basic high school education. Because what it takes is that if you believe the randomization was done well, you just need to compare the sample means. And I think most of us in this room can calculate the sample average. It's basically, you get sum up different outcomes in two different groups and compare the average and compare whether they're statistically different or not. Essentially, as I said, well, that's what's the beauty of randomization. If you can do it properly in the design, do the analysis is really a piece of cake. But we also did one step beyond. It's not only comparing sample means, we also did it in a simple regression framework. Essentially, if you look at our regressions and more detailed specifications of the regression, essentially is nothing more than sample means. That's what it collapses to when we do randomization. And I won't go into the econometric properties of that, but that's what it is. We did that as one version. And then something else we did as impact evaluation methodology. I won't go into the details here. That's just different specification tests. It's something called instrumental variable regressions. And what you do is that you instrument whether you receive the actual program or not with the allocation, or randomized allocation. And that requires a little bit of more statistical and econometric explanation, which I won't go into here. But we also did that as a specification test. Something else that we're doing is much, much more complicated, is that we actually have another sample. It's not only the randomized control treatment sample, but what it is, it's called a regression discontinuity design sample. Let me just go over that very briefly. It sounds something esoteric, but it really isn't, in a way, in terms of the concept. The technique is very difficult, right? But remember I talked about a poverty line. Right? Any poverty line, whether it's drawn in the Philippines or if it's drawn in Poland, it doesn't matter. It's arbitrary, right? You say that people are poor if they have a certain level of income. If they even have 1 peso more, they're non-poor, right? If you have 1 kroner more, whatever, you're non-poor. This is the reality. This is how social programs, this is how we assign poverty. Say, for example, in every single country of this earth, there's something called a poverty line. And if you're just slightly above it, you're not considered to be poor. If you're even slightly below it, you're poor. So think about household in Philippines. I'm just coming back actually from Ilocos right now. So there, the poverty line, say of household, it's about 6,000 something pesos. Right? So if you have 6,001 peso, you're non-poor. And if you have 5,999 pesos, you will consider poor, right? But that 1 peso difference doesn't make a difference, right, between a household. Whether you're poor or non-poor, that's for our classification. But for reality, these households are really similar, right? But some just got the program, and some just didn't get the program. And this is where that design comes from. So this is another wave of impact evaluation. Actually, as we move ahead, we can't do randomized controlled trials. You can't keep certain households away from that program for too long. Maybe at the beginning we have justification as we're rolling out the program. We're phasing in, but you can't randomly keep them out of the program forever. So what you have to do is that you have to go to this other technique that's called randomized RDD, regression discontinuity design. And as I said, there you do it's natural. It's a natural experiment. That's what economists also label as a natural experiment. And they say that some people get the program, some people don't, just because there's some cutoff line, and which is the reality. But there, I won't go into the econometrics of that because it's a very convoluted estimation. It takes a lot of econometric rigor to get the correct estimation of that. But again, that's why I go back to the beauty of RCT, is that RCT, the estimates that Director Dor showed you, actually those are the most simple ones. Actually, there's the beauty and the elegance of simplicity. Those estimates will be what's considered the preferred and best estimates, even if you compare them to the RDD. But just to kind of sum up, is that for our most powerful estimate, you've actually already seen them, and that's what Director Doris has presented. That's from the randomized control trials, in which, in the beginning, certain barangays were randomly selected to receive the program, certain barangays were not. Now, as I said, all barangays in that sample have the program, but it was off that initial impact. What was this impact of the program? And Director Doris showed you those results. In the future, as we're moving ahead with larger scale, it's not only for those sets, but nationally representative samples and so forth. We're going to use a technique that's called regression discontinuity design. How to use it, at least the rationale for that is simple. The technique is very, very complicated, and later on people can go into the details of that. Thank you.